This is an afterword on language, visibility, and what comes next. The information closes with a particularly unfashionable claim, I imagine. Likely true, though, in a century or perhaps 5. The smallest private stance scales. Something like a quiet dismissal. It seems small in the moment, but it travels. It travels from room to a team. It travels through a family, into a culture that someone else then has to endure. Often when we doubt another person, we're rehearsing a doubt we already carry about ourselves. It leaks out as an eye roll or a slow reply that never comes. A tired story about, people these days. It feels subtle, even harmless, yet it lands hard. It shrinks the other person. It erodes trust and quietly gives us permission to hold back our effort. Most of the time, the other isn't trying to diminish you at all, but an offhand retort still has consequences. Life is short. None of us gets a special pass. And if you decide it's all for nothing anyway, you'll find evidence for that everywhere. Or you can choose a healthier way to make things better on purpose, make things lighter, clearer, more decent, and for those who cannot yet, and for those who are yet to arrive. Now, that choice, these choices are ordinary, but they're repeatable and they're contagious. It's how cultures change. Jung taught us to recognize the shadow. The future will ask more. It'll ask to treat projection not as pathology alone, but as a routine mirror check before we touch a person or a policy. What you condemn in another is often your unexamined fragment looking back. The mature move is not to perform tolerance, but to name your shard, lay it down, and then proceed. In such a civilization, ethics are no longer theatre. It becomes infrastructure, like clean water or power, continuously available, quietly load-bearing, and missed only when it's absent. And because culture is a school with no recess, every act is curriculum. You're always learning, and whether you intend to or not, always teaching to some degree as well. And in this, dignity is the ground, not the garnish. Privacy, consent, and pace, these are not extras we bring out on a good day. They are the minimum standard on the worst days, when fear is high and choices are tight. Least restrictive, by default, is more than a value statement. It's a clock we keep. If restraint happens at all, it happens only as a last resort for the shortest possible time, with every minute accounted for, followed by a same shift check and a plain English explanation to the person and their supporters, and then a revisiting, like a 72-hour learning review with a concrete fate plan. The aim is not to win an argument that restraint is bad. The aim is to become technically excellent at making it unnecessary through communication access, environmental adjustments, pacing, skilled de-escalation. Skilled de-escalation. And Clear roles so people know who is doing what and why they're doing it. This is adult work. It asks for quiet competence and steadiness, noticing triggers before they flash, speaking simply and respectfully, making space and protecting the person's choices even when the room is noisy and time is short. When teams practice this, harm is prevented before anyone can put words to why the room feels safer and calm. And that is the standard. We must stop confusing pace with worth. Some people receive the world the way a weak radio catches a station. Static, then clarity. The humane response is not to scold the static. It is to reduce the noise. Fewer inputs, plainer cues, one step at a time, and a brief check back in. Check back with them in their own words. When understanding is late to arrive, we're faced with a fork. Read it as defiance, or adjust the setting so as comprehension can take root. Choosing the latter is what grown societies do. And usefulness will always beat niceness. Warmth without precision keeps problems intact. Precise help, even when a little uncomfortable, moves lives. Pair evidence with empathy. If your numbers and a person's dignity don't line up, the problem is your method, not their humanity. The target isn't optics, it's durable capacity, skills and routines that still work tomorrow without you in the room. And for those who carry titles, our judges, clinicians, principals, executives, officers, the test is simple. Speak so the room can act. Lead with one plain sentence of purpose, then the steps, the choices, the what if it goes wrong, and the time and place of review. Trade your acronyms for verbs. Give reasons anyone could explain to a neighbour. Ask for a teach back. Can you put this in your own words so I know I've made sense? Put the reason in writing, and put it in writing with a name and a number and the next step. The next step is important, and leave space for questions as well. Authority earns trust when it makes power legible and help actionable. When the person in front of you doesn't speak the institution's language, maybe they're angry or halting or swearing or off script, treat that as data, not disrespect. Never grade trauma for grammar. Separate heat from truth. Extract the claim, the evidence, and the ask. Say something like, I can hear this matters, so let me play back what I think you're saying or trying to say, and then summarize and check accuracy. Offer amnesty for language, no penalties for dialect or tears or rough edges. Provide a navigator or an advocate and pay them when you can. Document the decision and the reasons in plain English. Refuse the decorum tax, where polish buys credibility and pain is discounted for lack of jargon. Substance first, style second. People before protocol. A civilization matures when it makes hate expensive and remedy cheap. Hatred often feels like a need because it's a shortcut. When people are overwhelmed, thrown by change, stung by humiliation, or scared by loss of control, The nervous system reaches for relief before it reaches for accuracy. Hate offers a quick conversion. Uncertainty collapses and hardens into certainty. Isolation flips into instant belonging, and a level of helplessness masquerades as agency. In the body, that can feel like clarity, and in the moment, works, which is why so many of us reach for it. But it's rented relief at a high interest rate. And what does this actually purchase? This effective relief? Well, where pain becomes misguided action, it purchases little. Moral license where punishment feels righteousness? No. Cognitive savings where mixed messy motives and partial causality are avoided? Or perhaps it purchases status cover. Private shame gets laundered as public certainty. And group credit. We belong without doing the slower work of building bridges. Importantly, what debt does it actually incur? Dehumanization. That makes later cruelty simply easier. It makes policy errors that flow from simplified stories, vendettas that crowd out solutions, violence dressed as virtue, and probably most corrosive, cultures that reward contempt over repair. The adult task is to price that shortcut correctly and make repair cheap. Slow the moment, check the facts, widen the circle, and choose actions that reduce harm now and make the next encounter easier. That kind of clarity takes longer up front, but it compounds into safety, trust, and competence, the real dividends of an advanced society. And we won't sermonize our way there. We have to build there by auditing humiliation as if it were pollution, by giving grief lawful lanes, by mixing lives until strangers become co-practitioners, by publishing reasons fast enough that outrage loses its only argument, that nothing else works. This is why hatred is best treated as a design failure, not destiny. Our systems too often make the hateful option cheap and the careful option expensive. If the fastest path to attention is contempt and the slow path to remedy is clogged, people will take the fast road. If we redesign the roads and the need drops, slow mass outrage, speed fair process. Now we're on the pathway. In practice, it's like a type of covenant, and it feels like this. You arrive and you park your story. You breathe once long enough to turn judgment into description. You set a calm tempo and offer real choices. You do one concrete thing that reduces friction now, and you leave a trace others can copy. When you miss, and you will, we all miss, you own it without theatre. Apologise once, restore consent, and restart slower, clearer. This is what teach by conduct looks like. It rejects the fantasy that perfection is the point. Improvement in daylight is the point. Leaders are simply those who go first at repair. True leaders. The sequence is stable. Disclose, debrief, design a guardrail, try again at the other's pace. That loop, humility, which goes on to repair, which moves into redesign, is more protective than any posture of certainty. It's how trust compounds. It is how quiet professions keep civilizations from tearing at their seams. And it is how the private vow of care becomes a public contract. Everyone's admitted debt. No longer a problem, but a design requirement. Hold one sentence in view when fatigue tempts you to abbreviate this covenant. If I'm not making it easier, I'm making it harder, and there is no neutral gear. Ease paid forward, privacy restored, capability built, dignity preserved. This is the interest a civilization earns on its intelligence. The cleverness of a people is the speed at which it updates. The wisdom of a people is the gentleness with which it proceeds at another human's pace. Now, the former can be simulated by machines. The latter is still ours to demonstrate. So, we return to where this begins. Your smallest private stance scales. Treat another's vulnerability not as a verdict on their worth, but as a doorway to your growth. Name your shadow, match the tempo, choose the precise, helpful act, publish reasons. Consider hate as an artifact of weak design. Then specify the hydraulics that make adulthood the path of least resistance. Learn in daylight. What follows will show the cost of forgetting and the gains of remembering this covenant. The Threshold Covenant. In concluding, perhaps let me tell it as a story, because that's how the first accounting was kept. Around a fire, in memory, in the bodies of people who survived the season and those who didn't. In the beginning, the village measured worth by what could be counted before winter. Meat on the rack, grain in the pit, stones stacked against the flood. In that counting, speed looked like wisdom and strength looked like truth. A child who moved out of rhythm with the drumline of the day, who startled at the light, who learned words like they were slippery fish, who needed time, a child unlike others, asked the village to bend its tempo. Now, under a sky ruled by weather and luck, bending the tempo felt like blasphemy against scarcity. Councils of men, faces smoked and scarred, weighed the seasons aloud. Hunters spoke in verbs: run, lift, carry, fight. The quiet work inside the hut: feeding, soothing, scaffolding, meaning one gesture at a time. Well, this wasn't yet a language that the men could hear. So the first debt was miscast. Care was counted as delay, and in that time, delay was priced as danger. Still, there was a counterweight to the council. A mother at the threshold, holding the future close. She had already survived a trial the council didn't have words for. Months of being two people at once. The raw mathematics of blood and breath, the bargain with pain. In that arithmetic, love was not a feeling. It was a failsafe. Too much labour and hope had already been spent for her to accept the village's small ledger. She pressed for inspection, for help, for change, long before those were disciplines. Around her gathered the fringe dwellers, the curious, the healers, the women with hands that could coax life from fever and milk from silence. They were not yet a profession. They were a circle with a single rule: keep trying. In their hut, the child's difference was a problem to be solved by attention. Outside, it was a sign to be read by fear. Unfortunately, when sacrifice shows itself in public, the unknown walks in with it. People saw a mother keep vigil and felt a tug they couldn't name. Was this holy or foolish? The world of limited firewood and thin harvests prefers a quick verdict, and difference seldom wins a quick vote. So a second drift began. Men who could not feel the tether mistook it for madness. Neighbours misread patience as waste. The bond remained private, coded as women's work, and the village built no structure to carry it. This was our species in its adolescence, ingenious with tools, clumsy with time, brave against predators, timid before tenderness. We were certain about gods and weather, but baffled by the slow alchemy of learning. We then cloaked our discomfort in stories. Some said the gods were angry. Some said a spirit had taken hold. Some said the child was sent as a test to weigh the tribe. These stories cut both ways. In one village, a shaman kept the child close, teaching the village to wait, to watch, and to practice the old arts of wonder and wandering. In another village, the omen was taken as a mark to be hidden, held in a weary respect, and deemed off limits to inquiry. Across generations, the outcomes diverged. Where patience was ritualized, the circle widened and skills grew. Where impatience was sanctified, exclusion hardened into custom. The same river of human feeling ran beneath both. The difference was whether we built channels or walls. Centuries passed. Scarcity eased in fits and starts, then returned, then eased again. Empires rose, cities crowded, trade quickened the clock. And yet the old mispricing followed us into the new age, into every new age. The work that held difference, slow coaching, low arousal approaches, mealtime safety, seizure literacy, the humility to fade prompts, kept getting filed under sentiment. The village council had become an office, a parliament, a market floor, but the bias was unchanged. Pay for spectacle. Ask patience to volunteer. Professions that grew out of the hut carried the hut status. Necessary, feminine, invisible. Even when they earned uniforms and titles, their wages remembered the first vote under the lean-to. We armed the mispricing with theories. Survival of the fittest, we said, grasping at Darwin like a weapon. We ignored the elephants who wring a calf, the dolphins who lift their young to breathe, the wolves who feed an injured packmate. We ignored our own record too. Outbreaks survived because nurses stood their ground. Wars endured because someone kept mending bodies. Economies recovered because teachers quietly rebuilt minds. No, we preferred the story where the hero is fast and loud. The tale where the hero sits still long enough for another nervous system to synchronize. Well, that felt too small for the stage. Across the long arc, the child is still with us. luckily no longer miscast as the eternal child, but recognised now as a person, yet still shadowed by a stigma that should never have existed. For some, the world arrives a half-beat late and out of order. Like subtitles that drift from the film, words come, meaning lands after the moment has moved on. And before any task begins, there's already a tax to pay. Sorting glare, filtering noise, decoding faces that change faster than the sky. By afternoon, the ledger of small costs is full. And from the outside, it's easy to name this indifference, or defiance, or cycles of deviancy. From the inside, it is endurance, a resilience most of us are never asked to cultivate. In the old village, there was no word for latency. There was only a sense that the child would not keep up. We have the word now, and still we punish the lag as character. That's not maturity. It's a habit we forgot to unlearn. The plain truth, simple, human, and actually close to shame, is this. The many of us who live outside the daily reality of such difference carry a single crude picture when the subject arises. We don't imagine the plethora of complexities in the slow building of everything from language through to careful coaching of something as simple as sleep. We reduce the whole field of working with somebody that has cognitive challenges, intellectual disability, and acquired brain injury. We reduce the whole field and industry to toilet care and recoil. Who, we ask, other than a parent, and even then not always, who would choose to wipe a stranger's bottom? The thought feels unsayable in polite rooms, so we laugh it off or fall quiet. We forget that each of us performs this act for ourselves almost daily, and that the distance between me and someone who cannot yet is not moral, but circumstantial and often temporary. But the real work is not confined to a bloody toilet. It is maturity about circumstance. It is evolution. It is the complex teaching, patiently and proficiently, a sequence that preserves dignity for a lifetime, that those outside of the field simply never consider. Noticing the signal, planning the route, managing clothing and balance, cleaning well, washing hands, resetting calm, returning to the day. It's in infection control. It's in privacy, sensory regulation in a small, echoing room, cues when words are scarce, patience when the body is frightened or the timing is a beat off. This goal is not simply a clean moment. This goal is about independence, assistance. That takes real time, real expertise, supervision and respect. Exactly the things our old ledgers underfunded because the task looked dirty instead of clinical, instead of essential, instead of human. Those who step towards this vulnerability, who treat another's need as a doorway rather than a verdict, well, they learn something larger than care. That connection is not merely medicine for the self alone, but the substance of what we all are. We all get our hands dirty in life. The point is not to deny it. It is to turn that shared fact into a heightened perspective beyond craft, a future-proofing aptitude that restores privacy, builds capability, and lets more of us move through the day unescorted. Who steps up when most step back? Well, not only mothers, fathers, nurses, and volunteers. Often it is the people our societies misname as marginal. Workers on the edges, migrants, the quietly stubborn, who understand that the world is bigger than the self and that civilization is measured in how we guard one another's privacy and pride at our most vulnerable. We've been wrong to read this as low status. Accomplished appropriately, it is a high competence with an extremely low wage. Call this a witness voice. Call it the scribe who sits one pace back from the epistemological fire and offers the plain account beneath the story. We undervalued this work, not because it lacked worth, but because our early ledgers were written by those who didn't stand at the threshold of the hut. Fear and scarcity taught us to count what moved quickly. Misaligned levels of patriarchy taught us to discount what moved quietly. Anthropocentrism taught us to despise what we didn't look like us, didn't think like us, or keep our pace. Those three tutors, fear, scarcity, and pride, graduated into policy. Now, once policy hardens, architecture follows. Institutions built to contain rather than nurture. Pay scales that make care a vow of poverty. Training that arrives late and thin. And yet the Mother's Covenant, the overdue bridge that welcomes whichever hands will join in crossing this threshold, well, it remains the most adult work we do. It is not soft. It is engineering. It slows the clock until two tempos can meet. It publishes what matters, minutes of restraint, days in ordinary places, and learns fast from failure. It proves that the quiet professions really do keep civilizations from tearing at their seams. Adolescence ends when the village, now society, rewrites its ledgers. When care moves from private vow to public contract, from largely women's unpaid burden to everyone's acknowledged debt, from blessing or curse to design requirement. We are late to that rewriting. We are not too late. In our story, as the scene widens, the street light has long replaced the village fire. The hut is a kitchen now, a clinic, a shed, an office, a factory, a lab, an online portal. The village is a city that hums and stutters, full of signal and haze. The counting is louder than ever. Likes, clicks, dollars, cases, codes. But the old era still haunts the tally. And yet everywhere, quiet achievers move the ledger grain by grain. In one back shed, a teenager learns the patience of how to solder. A cheap 3D printer chattering beside jars of screws, a prosthetic wrist taking shape layer by layer. In another, a robotics club reworks an exoskeleton so it tunes itself to gait and fatigue, not spectacle. In a library after hours, a volunteer shows a room of strangers how to caption their own videos so elders can hear with their eyes. At the local TAFE, a tutor builds a micro-credential that treats support worker as clinician, pairing low arousal practice with seizure first aid and safe meal times. Men's sheds repair mobility devices between stories. Cousins in a granny flat hack together DIY air quality sensors and post the graphs for their street. On country, rangers walk with satellites and story, reading fires with both. Frontline rooms carry the same light. A nurse replaces a brittle checklist with a handover that actually asks, what calms, what frightens, what works when nothing else does? An ambo crew reviews the 1 minute before a restraint, not to defend it, but to find the first fork where another choice could have been made. The teacher co-designs an AAC board with a family and stops calling paperwork care. In a small clinic, a rural GP keeps a pocket ultrasound and a really long memory for people's lives, knowing that both will save a trip to town. Further up the hill, labs and superstructures hum. A synchrotron images materials that will make sensors smaller and cheaper. Another to study the structure of viruses and proteins. A hospital biobank shortens the road from suspicion to diagnosis. A clean room prints the next-gen chip that will sit in a wearable and whisper to a phone that says, stand up now before dizziness becomes a fall. National Compute runs protein models at breakfast and climate models by lunch. Civic tech teams publish open dashboards that let families track the care that matters. We have startups. They're writing glue code that lets old systems speak, and open source contributors fix a critical bug at 2 a.m. without bothering to sign their names because they want to. And the youth of today, my goodness, what a resource, what an asset. The youth of today still remain potential and are not a problem to be solved. They are the proof that adaptation is native. For every loud harm, there are 9 quiet repairs. Students mentor peers they will never meet. Young carers teach officials to write letters people can actually read. Under 25 founders ship tools that work, then answer emails at midnight because someone needed the fix. Early career clinicians refuse to let the computer says no pass for care. Their distractions are many. This youth, their feeds are noisy. This youth, their worlds are extremely complex. And yet, they are still ahead of their time because by design, they are the prospects for success. The advanced quiet achievers. It is activation time. The season is acceleration. For those of us born earlier, we actually are living in the future. Pathogens are sequenced in regional labs. CRISPR-class edits face down blood disorders once thought immovable. Lab on a chip rides to the bedside in a pocket. Neural interfaces give back a voice. Rehab robots remember that fatigue is a clinical sign, not a failure of will. Organoids test drugs so as fewer human bodies have to, fewer animal bodies have to. Blood tests at point of use shrinks the queue at an emergency department. AI designs pharmaceuticals overnight and helps triage and roster the next, reducing waits without reducing people to codes. Fraud detectors protect honest providers so that trust can flow again. Multi-model captioners open doors for those in the communities that cannot hear. Translation whisperers across languages and into easy read. Digital twins pressure test policy, and simple e-receipts with plain English reasons rebuild the kind of confidence the old hut carried without paperwork. As a majority, we tend to focus on the latest media coverage, usually predominantly negative. But many of us have already sourced alternatives in private positive feeds. Meshworks, networks, low Earth satellites keeping remote clinics online. We have live captioning and data shared with restraint and precision so teams can coordinate without stripping anyone bare. Dashboards are written in the language of families and frontline staff, not committees. Greener materials rebuild the places we broke. Farms save water and soil by noticing again. Micro-mobility gives streets back to people. Competence is measured in what we can actually do in the room, not what we claim on a form. Simulation labs let people practice the moments where harm loves to hide. And still, while all these gardens are being planted, the old wards of pride and the old worship of speed stagger on. Remarkably, starvation keeps its passport. Mainstream media grows into a revenue-driven demigod. Thin lives pass for normal, and much of it remains, to our shame, actually legal. That is the part of the story where the narrator looks up from this page and says, "This is not fate. This is design. And being design, it can be changed." Which brings us to you, the person listening to this, or if you're reading the transcript or as part of the white paper that it's connected to. You have abilities, attributes, potential, a proven record, whether or not you have named it that way, time, energy, resources you may not yet have recognized. They do not need to remain dormant. In a world this complex, a small, well-aimed act is not small at all. Write the letter, share the prototype, convene the meeting that should have already happened, clean the dataset, join the rostering fix, add the safeguard, restore dignity, start where your hands already are, and then simply just widen the circle by just one more person. No one alive can prove what this life is about with the kind of certainty that silences questions. Very few of us are at our best consistently, and no one person knows best. What we do know, what the first mother at the threshold knew, is that we get through by helping one another pace the day. The first exclusion was an error of accounting made by frightened geniuses. The repair is an act of maturity. Pay for what holds the world together. Teach it. Supervise it. Renew it. Tell the story so the next council, in whatever clothes it wears, remembers the hut as the place where our species first learned to be more than clever, where we learned to be human at the pace another human needs. It's emotional. It's psychologically draining, emotionally draining, intellectually draining, spiritually draining to watch the plight of people that can't communicate with us like other people can communicate with us, quietly have to go through their lives the way they've been going through them since our species began. It's not if we can change. Of course we can change. People in positions of power, people outside of positions of power, from the person on the street to your God, if you have one, or source, or the multiverse, or whatever it is. Everybody has the ability to change. Everybody has the ability to help somebody else. I walked into the pub the other night, and there was a bloke out the front. And he said, "G'day," and I said, "G'day." And I opened the door for him, and I said, "It's nice to have someone open a door for you every now and then, isn't it?" And he said, "Yes." And then as we walked in, there was a second set of doors, and he opened the door for me, and we grinned at each other. It's simple. It's about time we lift our game, level up. It is activation time. The season is acceleration. And we actually are living in the future. And for my beautiful son, my diamond in the rough, the most resilient person I have ever met, who taught me how to think when things weren't right. The rules of goodness, Dad. The rules of goodness. What a pearl of wisdom. This paper is for him. This information is for him and for everyone who moves at a different tempo. May those rules guide what we build next so people are sane. Safety is proven, and belonging is practiced in ordinary places every day.